A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Financial Markets this evening. My name is Anthony Sebale, and I am your host. And this is, of course, coming in from Now Avenue Plot 42, Kampala, where we hail to give you updates in business. As we say, we do drive business in Kampala and within the region. First up to speed with what we have coming up in our top stories tonight. We have, of course, number one coming in from Kenya. The Central Bank of Kenya has actually embarked on a rise of their interest rate, with the central bank rate raised by 200 basis points to close to 12.5%. And this has sent shockwaves throughout all the interest rates in the region and within the country, as of course banking rates have now averaged 17.5%. Well, in another story, they're still in relation to Kenya. We have a couple of companies that were meant to list on the Nairobi Securities Exchange that are putting that off, given the current market conditions that are actually giving us a bear market kind of environment. And that, given the fact that the country is also still faced with a double-digit inflation, as well as a depreciation of the currency, there is more to be desired when it comes to listing or new listings on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. In another story, we're going to be unpacking for you the new Chief Executive Officer of the Capital Markets Authority, and that is Madam Osia, who is now taking over office from Mr. Keith Kalijira. She will be taking office on the 5th of Feb 2024. We'll be looking into her CV. We'll be looking into what challenges lie ahead. And last week we did discuss with Mr. Council Chizito Lewis about what, of course, some of the challenges are that the Capital Markets Authority is still to face after the reign of Mr. Keith Kalijira. We'll be also looking at some of the achievements that Keith has been able to put and the mark that Keith has been able to leave at the Capital Markets Authority of Uganda. But first, let's have a look at the stock market performance for the day. Well, looking at the Uganda Securities Exchange summary for Monday on the 11th of December today, 2023, by the close of the markets today, at the end of the very first weekday of trading, the day ended with at least 399,862 shares that have been traded on the Uganda Securities Exchange, corresponding to a market value of at least 47.3 million Ugandan shillings that has been traded for the day. Comparing today with Friday, the 8th of December, the data shows a 76% decline in the volume and at least 85% decline in the turnover. The current market capitalization of the exchange is 16.1 trillion Ugandan shillings. In aggregate, in terms of participation, there were 4 participants or 4 equities that traded on the first weekday of trading. Now, remember, we are winding up the year. It's a time where very many things are getting done in these companies. Financial statements are being made ready. The final sales for the year are being made. It's Christmas season, and there's a lot that goes down within these companies. And this does not come just easily for the stock market as well. And when you look at the participating parties here in the trade, the 4 equities included Stanbic Bank and MTN Uganda, as well as National Insurance Corporation and Airtel Uganda, with Stanbic Bank Uganda having the biggest share of the shares that have been traded. Stanbic Bank Uganda traded at least 100,000 shares on Monday and closed at an appreciation of 0.06%. And this was up to 32.5 Ugandan shillings closing off the day. And when you look at the other participant, that is National Insurance Corporation, closed off at just 6.50 Ugandan shillings, and that was a 20,000 volume that has been traded on the company. MTN Uganda at least closed off with a volume of 230,962 shares. Matter of fact, this makes them the biggest trader for the day, with a closing price of 170.0 Ugandan shillings. And finally, Airtel Uganda traded 48,900 shares. That resulted into a depreciation of 0.56%, down to 96.44 Ugandan shillings. Now, on the landscape, when you look at the major losers and gainers here on the market, pretty interestingly, the most of the companies here are gaining, especially when you look at some of the participating companies like Stanbic Bank Uganda, which is a very interesting fact. Whenever you have a participant in the trading gain, it shows that people are having a positive outlook on the market. And besides that, the rest of the companies were cross-listed, cross-listings, that is Equity Bank Limited, Jubilee Holdings, KCB, National Media Group, Kenya Airways, as well as East African Breweries Limited. East African Breweries Limited at least appreciated by 0.39% and closed off the day at 2,770.88 Ugandan shillings. That was on the very first day of trading. Kenya Airways, on the other hand, had an appreciation of 0.61%, and that was at a 94.75 Kenyan shillings close, whereas NMG added 0.61% up to a price of 494.80. KCB Group had at least an appreciation of 0.87% up to a closing price of 477.48 Ugandan shillings, whereas Jubilee Holdings appreciated by 0.89% up to a price of 4,515, and Equity Bank Limited appreciated at least by 1.55% up to 933.94 Ugandan shillings. Those are amongst the top gainers for the day today. Remember, top gainers usually are influenced by either market movement or other factors outside the marketplace. Mainly this happens for cross listings. So when the day closes for trade, the Uganda Stock Exchange harmonizes prices on the cross listings from the Uganda Securities Exchange and in comparison to the Nairobi Securities Exchange, where they are primarily listed. So don't be very beleaguered, or don't actually get surprised when you see counters like Equity, East African Breweries Limited, that are cross-listed from Nairobi, actually have shifts in prices despite illiquidity or despite no movement on the Uganda Stock Exchange. All that happens because cross-listings always have other dynamics that are playing out, including the currency forex exchange rates, as well as inflation. All these factors are brought in, and the market activity on these counters on their primary stock exchange. This is where some of these results are actually got. On the other hand, the number of losers on the market was just two, and this was Airtel Uganda and Centum Investments. Now, Airtel Uganda is the freshest company on the exchange, and Airtel Uganda came in as a very interesting IPO for that matter. An IPO that lasted pretty much longer than we had thought, after there was an extension of the IPO for 2 weeks. This was, according to the company, to allow more investors to come in who are rushing in at the last minute. And the company did have a very successful, not very, we could say, in terms of subscription, they were definitely undersubscribed to, but the success they enjoyed was number of new investors that increased, as well as new accounts that were opened using Airtel code or USSD code. And that is exactly the business that we are all about: increasing number of investors, retail, institutional investors, as well as getting new accounts. And that would, of course, mean success for the IPO. However, the company got a challenge with the pricing, and later on in their extension period, they subsidized the price of their stock. From 100 shillings before, they came down to at least, if I'm not mistaken, 70 shillings for retail investors, and about 47 shillings for institutional investors. Following that announcement, the National Social Security Fund, which is a body that is in charge of handling massive investments when it comes to retirement funds, and this institution rather, invested heftily. Over 10% of the IPO was invested in by NSSF by at least a share of 199 billion Ugandan shillings that they bought into the company. Well, Airtel Uganda currently is in the muddied waters of the Uganda Stock Exchange. And just as per today's trading, the company has lost 0.58%, down to 96.44 Ugandan shillings. Maybe you can share your thoughts with me. Why is it that in terms of trade, whenever the company comes off the primary market or the initial public offer, the price is almost deemed to fall? Yes, sometimes the prices rise back again and even above IPO prices. We've seen companies like Umeme. Umeme came on board with a price of at least about 300 shillings, and now they're currently at 400. That has happened, but in most cases it doesn't happen immediately. In most cases we have a downward spiral until you hit rock bottom, and then you have the company coming back up. Why is that so? Is it that the investors are scared already at this point? And I think that's partly the answer to the question of why prices fall immediately after companies get listed on the secondary market or after the initial public offer. Why is it that prices fall? You know, investors in Uganda are some of the most critical and very anxious of a kind. And when you look at how, for example, they reacted to the MTN IPO immediately after listing, some of them expected returns. I don't know how much they expected. And yes, the company did deliver on dividends. Matter of fact, so far, MTN has issued 5 consecutive dividends since listing. And that's a very, very great performance. But some people over-expected, maybe probably how much they had invested, given the fact that the company listed at a 200 shillings price. They expected probably to get a return of at least 50% or something, which doesn't happen always, all right? And so some of them started to pull out, thinking that probably this was a hoax. This wasn't something that was going to happen for them, or something that was going to work in the long term for them. And that's where most of them made the mistake. And this is what we're seeing on Airtel Uganda. Airtel listed on the 7th of November with a price of 100 shillings, at least a total of 420 billion Ugandan shillings worth of market capitalization, and a 2.62% representation of the entire stock exchange. This makes Airtel Uganda the 9th most valuable stock on the Uganda Securities Exchange. When you look at the pricing, since 100 shillings, the price fell slightly to 97, and then now currently at 96.44 Ugandan shillings. The price is currently still under a lot of baffling. And the current performances on year to date, of course, the company wasn't listed by the start of the year, but in the last 4 weeks, at least 3.56% has been shed off on average from the market price of Airtel Uganda stock. Airtel Uganda stock also is the 9th most traded on stock currently. That's a very interesting fact, that we have 19 stocks on the exchange, and amongst these, the youngest stock to be listed is the 9th most traded on. And in the past quarter, or in the past 1 month, because the company has just listed and hasn't made a quarter yet, from the 10th of November to the 11th of December, Airtel Uganda has traded a total volume of 213,236 shares, way more than companies like Centum, way more like companies like East African Breweries and so on and so forth that have been listed for quite some time, which is pretty commendable. And the amount of turnover that they have had on the market is over 20.8 million shillings. Let's see what happens for Airtel Uganda on the exchange. But this is a pretty good performance, and we hope for more performances here. Do not be discouraged when the prices go down. When we talk about losers, we're not really saying the company has lost or the company is going down. These are just market dynamics that play out sometimes for you as an investor, sometimes against you. But all in all, you have to have a longer term view of things. And that's the way you will be able to keep those shares in and keep your money growing. Regarding the performance of the indices, indices performed pretty well, given the fact that we had 7 top gainers rather. And the index that we know about as the benchmark, that is the All-Share Index, climbed at least by 2.73 points up to 893.77 points. This was a 1-week gain of 0.5% and a 4-week loss of 0.23%, whereas an overall year-to-date loss of 26.29%. A US local company index, which tracks the aggregate performance of only the local stocks, which are 10 in total right now, at least closed off with a decrease of 0.17%, down to 275.68 points. And this was basically on the backdrop of the losses from Airtel Uganda only, as the only domestic stock that lost value this Monday as we look at the stock market performance. Generally speaking, that's it from the Uganda Stock Exchange. However, more details coming in from the exchange are on our website, also on our screen back right there in the screen. Those figures are as accurate as now, and from that you can base your decision on how you're going to be able to trade tomorrow. We have a couple of other stocks that I don't mention very often, but they're still listed. Matter of fact, they are active. Sometimes they trade a few shares, and so you can place in your bid for some of your shares to be bought there. We do have British American Tobacco priced at 15,000. We do have Bank of Baroda at 15 shillings. We do have at least Cipla QCIL or Cipla Quality Chemical Industries at 52.50 Ugandan shillings. We do have DFCU Bank at 249.91 shillings. And as well, East African Breweries Limited at 2,770. Kenya Airways 94.75 shillings. We do have a Nation Media Group at 494.80, as well as New Vision Printing and Publishing Company at 153, and then as Uganda Clays at 13 Ugandan shillings, and finally Umeme at least 411.9 shillings. Now we have 19 listings now, with Airtel Uganda listing lately, and we have more listings. That's exactly what we want. More companies coming to list. The capital markets is indeed one of the quickest and cheapest way to raise capital. You just go to the public, they buy shares into your company, and of course, you raise the capital. You grow your business, you make more profits, you come back and share some with your shareholders. Simple logic, very simple idea, and a very great way to actually raise capital there from the capital markets here in Uganda. Now, looking at still the capital markets, we do have a regulatory body on the capital markets authority, known as the Capital Markets Authority, CMA. Now, what awaits the new boss of this regulatory body, Madame Osia? And we are now looking at what exactly is ahead of this lady, who is equipped with a whole vast of experience from different financial institutions, including Bank of Uganda as a board member, the Institution of Certified Public Accountants as the president now, when you look at the Bujagali water project or dam project, she was still part of the finance committee there, actually heading the committee. Very great mind indeed. What awaits her for the next, I don't know how many, 5 years or so, and at the exchange? Now, she will be taking office on the 5th of Feb 2024. However, there was a stepping down of Mr. Keith Kalijira last week, but one at Mestil Hotel. And this appointment brings a touch of female executives at the CMA, a very first one indeed, and it will be effectively, replacing the male dominance on the position after Mr. Keith Kalijira, whose 2 terms of 5 years have actually come to an end. He had held the position since 2013. Under the reign of Mr. Keith Kalijira, large corporations, including Airtel Uganda, which was the most recent one, MTN Uganda, which was listed in 2021, Cipla Quality Chemical Industries, which was listed in 2018, have all listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange and has expanded the market capitalization of the exchange to 11.8 trillion minimum. The commitment extended of Mr. Kalijira, according to critics, extended beyond market expansion, as spearheaded 110 billion shillings in private and public debt, broadening the investor landscape and fostering economic growth through a more diversified financial system at the Capital Markets Authority. He has also been an instrumental person in increasing public understanding of capital markets, with evidence from the increase in popularity of the collective investment schemes that have attracted more than 65,000 new investors in the financial markets in Uganda and injected over 2.2 trillion Ugandan shillings into the market. However, the new boss must take on more to feed a market that seems to be a lot more hungry than Kate has left it. It is troubling to understand why in most cases the stock market has remained an unappealing avenue for large companies and conglomerates in need of cheap capital. And despite the rising cost of commercial debt, like we're going to talk about the one in Kenya, which averages at least at 18% for prime borrowers, no major corporations, save for Kakira Sugar Works, have issued corporate bonds at the moment. Kakira Sugar Works, for example, currently is running a 76 billion bond on the exchange, through which it had sought to raise capital in 2013. This is very disturbing. To date, only 9 corporate bonds have been issued in Uganda. Only 9 corporate bonds have been issued in Uganda, raising a combined 289 billion shillings, with majority of the issuers being financial institutions, especially those in the banking sector. Issuing bonds is one way that companies also raise money. What a bond is it functions as a loan between an investor and a corporation, and that the investor agrees to give the corporation at least a certain amount of money or portion of money for a specific period of time. In exchange, the investor receives periodic payments or interest payments known as coupons. These come in every after 6 months, especially for the long-term instruments that we call the bonds, corporate bonds. Now, as the interest is coming in at the end of the period of maturity, then you take the lump sum. You take the money you invested back into your pocket. That's how it works. But since the exchange began to date, we have had only 9 corporate bonds issued, and one of them being the one of Kakira Sugar Works, which has at least 76 billion listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. CMS says that most companies issue corporate bonds when they are expanding, but have failed to understand the alternative resource sourcing at the capital markets in Uganda. The Capital Markets Authority and Financial Sector Deepening Africa are currently working together to review the 2003 corporate bond guidelines with the goal of facilitating the process of raising alternative non-banking financing for project development and business expansion for a greater number of local governments and private companies. The amendment seeks to expand the range of debt products that can be issued, switch from merit-based approval to disclosure-based approval, among other things. Green bonds, municipal bonds, and infrastructure bonds are some of the other products that will be impacted. These are some of the other forms of bonds: the green bonds, the municipal bonds, and infrastructure bonds. Now, Mrs. Osia Josephine will also have to work with the market at a time with sovereign investors showing less interest into buying into companies that are presumed to be a hot sell. Airtel would be the best example to illustrate this. In its initial public offer, it attracted no offshore investors, meaning no one from abroad invested in the company, and was only served by the deadline day purchase of the National Security Fund, which was the only institutional investor that bought at least 10.55% of the company, offering 20% of its stake. This resulted in at least 58.18% under subscription. Many investors who, when you look at the other challenges as well, illiquidity, which we have always talked about here, lack of liquidity on the market, lack of awareness, information dissemination, all the challenges that Madame Osia is yet to face. Recently, some investors tried to, for example, sell Airtel stocks right after the company had been listed, but received relatively low bids, very low bids, according to data from Crested Capital, who is a stock broker. This creates posterity challenges and results into market agitation. Will Madame Osia stand up to the task and be able to actually get through, maneuver this tough economic environment and working environment? One of the other challenges she faces are some of the Ponzi schemes that compete with investment in the capital markets. And these, on the flip side, lead to losses of billions of Ugandan shillings that Ugandans actually invest in at first due to their seemingly very attractive interest or attractive returns that usually never come to fruition. That and more is what is awaiting Madame Osia Josephine, who is the new Chief Executive Officer of the Capital Markets Authority. We're going to take a very short break, and when we return, we're going to go into Kenya, have a look at NSE, how it's performing, and then we're going to look at why the three equities that actually companies that were meant to list, at least by next year, are pulling out. My name is Anthony. We'll return shortly. Stay with us.
Smart 24, driving business. Cooking oil like no other makes your meal so sweet and scrumptious. The taste of Uganda, yeah, the taste of Uganda.
Ng'oyolekera ku lugendo luno olw'obulamu nkuwa ekirabo eky'amaanyi agatazizibwa, amaanyi okulabibwa n'okuwulirwa mu mawanga ag'ewala ennyo, okutuuka buli wamu nga yadde togenzeeyo, ensi yonna ng'ekuli mu ngalo. Okutambula mu biseera n'okumanya buli kimu ekirina okumanyibwa. Jovia, kino kye kirabo kyange gy'oli.
Tewali kkubo ku ki ky'osobola okukola omukutu nnandameggwa ogwa MTN.
Roll up, roll up. Let's go. Welcome to DSTV Land. The most awesomest place to spend your holidays.
Suffering succotash.
There's loads to explore with something for everyone.
Amazing.
All the best shows.
Wow.
All the best buds.
It is pretty great.
So don't miss out and let the holiday fun begin.
It's a blast.
Only on DSTV.
Ugandans come to Ginger City every weekend. And December 16th, 2023 is Uganda's end-of-year party as Smart FM hosts the Smart Swag Fest Season 2. Don't miss performances from Uganda's top DJs, MCs and artists like the king herself, Cindy Baby, and her full band, Fig for Maker, UG Boys, Kesmon Switch, King Zamba, Waymaker Official, Voice Nasi, Zach Tom Rizla, Lance Soldier, and many more local artists. Let's meet at the Chairman's Back, next to Ginger Showgrounds. Get your early bird tickets now at 15K and at the gate 20K. Gets open from 10 a.m. till late. The Smart Swag Fest is organized by 89 Smart FM and Hot Shots. Powered by Smart 24 TV, Sisan Suits, NBS Cordeo, GZ Mechatronics, Ginger Hippos, Kampala University, Albeit Electronics and Solar Center, TMU Tubing and Rafting, Banji Uganda, Quad Biking Ginger, Cable Giants, Stardom Visuals and Audio, Bidco, and Club.
Tastefully different. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Smart 24, driving business.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for staying tuned at Smart 24 TV, where we drive your business. Find us on channels 302 GOTV and channel 372 DSTV on free-to-air decoders. Online, you can find us on YouTube on our channel that is at Smart 24 TV Live. On Twitter or X, we are at Smart 24 TV now. My name is Anthony, and you can find me at Anthony Sabali as well. I'm moving across to Kenya. A lot is happening in Kenya, and we'll start off with the performance of their stock exchange, just as per Monday trades. Looking at the Monday trades, at least out of the 66 listed companies, 40 participated in trade. At the end of the day, having 13 gainers and over 18 losers on the market. That already shows you how much there's an imbalance within the market. 18 losers, 13 gainers for the day. At the end of the first weekday, at least a total of 3.5 million shares were traded and 665 deals were done, corresponding to a market value of at least 37.6 million Kenyan shillings on the market. Compared with the previous day, that was 8th of December 2023, Friday, today's data shows a 42% decline in the volume and 64% decline in the turnover as well. Now, amongst the top gainers, at least British American Tobacco Kenya led the gainers with an appreciation of 4.71%, appreciating to at least a price of 422.50 Kenyan shillings. Home Africa added 3.7% on its value, and the real estate investment trust known as Ilam Fahari at least added 2.52%, and the Scan Group added 2.44% for their value there. On the losing side, Sanlam Kenya came in at the bottom, and Sanlam came out with a depreciation of 6.3%, depreciating to a price of 6.84 Kenyan shillings per share on the market. And when you look at other losers, we had TransCentury following suit with a 5.66% depreciation, as well as Kabaseed Investments with a 4.87% depreciation, and Williamson T Kenya with a depreciation of 4.78%. Now, Safaricom recorded the highest volume for the day after at least having at least 1.77 million shares traded, followed by Ken General Group with at least over 952,800 shares, and Kenya Power and Lighting Company with at least 319,000 shares, and KCB Group with over 149,300 shares that were traded. Regarding the performance of the NSE market indices, the benchmark index, the OSHA NSE index, at least paired or lost 0.08 points, down to 93.86 points. Other remarkable indices that we could take note of at Smart 24 were the NSE 20, which tracks the top 20 stocks by market capitalization or market value. It appreciated by 0.2%, and the Nairobi Securities Exchange 10 index, which tracks the top 10 stocks, at least depreciated by 0.38%, whereas the NSE 25 depreciated by 0.16%. Now, looking at the statistics here in Kenya, it just portrays a picture of why the Central Bank of Kenya is considering the rate hiking within the market. Before we go any further, let's have a look at the details here from the Kenyan Central Bank. Now, for Kenya, last week, the Central Bank of Kenya raised the Central Bank Kenya rate by 200 basis points, and in very simple terms, by 2%. This was to an increase or an increment of 12.5%. This move taken against the backdrop of a significant depreciation in the Kenyan shillings against the United States dollar, and it has so far pulled off far-reaching effects, implications for the Kenyan economy and financial markets. In contrast to Uganda, Uganda has maintained the central bank rate at a stable rate of 9.5%, which has been maintained by the Bank of Uganda, which is a noteworthy comparison. when you look at the impact on the bond yields, the way interest rates work is that the central bank rate almost has all its impact through other rates, the lending rates, the interbank rate, the credit, any rate you can think about in the market is affected by the interest, the central bank interest rate, or the CBR. Now, this also doesn't leave out the bond yields. The central bank rate increase will directly impact on the treasury bond yields in Kenya, making the government bonds and treasury bills more attractive to investors. Now, this is where you have to listen in very carefully. As for the last week, the 364-day treasury bill has already reached around 15%. And still expected to continue the rise in the near term. This rise in the interest rates is causing the value of the existing bonds to fall, a term known as the market-to-market adjustment. Now, here's the thing. You have a new rate introduced into the market where we had old rates already operating on, for example, the bonds that are 364 days and were issued in July. Let's say, I'm just giving a very rough example here. Now, that means that for those bonds that were actually issued in, or the bills, treasury bills that were issued in July, their price or their value is going to fall. But the ones that are going to be issued right now or past this announcement, they're going to be highly priced or highly valued at the moment. This is why most analysts are actually considering advising their clients on investing in treasury bonds in Kenya. But let's see the details here. Investors are likely to shift their portion, a significant portion of their investable funds towards government bonds and bills, withdrawing them from other investments like the stock market. Now, the stock market, like we've seen, like just today, 14 gainers and 18 losers. Things are not so good in the Kenyan market. Neither are they in the Ugandan market, but then for the Kenyan market, we expect more. When you're a big dog, we expect more. We always want to see more from you. And this is why we're having a lot of criticism from the outside parties, analysts on the exchange. Much as they're doing their best. No new listing. There's been a drought of IPOs on the market, illiquidity, very little local investment, and so on. Now, this could destabilize. That is the lack of investment in the stock market. It could destabilize further a stock market in the short term, as evidenced by the decline in stock prices of companies like the Kenya Commercial Bank, Safaricom, over the past 1 year. Let's look at, for example, Safaricom. I'm just looking at the graph here for Safaricom. For the Ugandans who are watching this, whereas the Kenyan bonds are giving higher yields, the Ugandan bonds also consider, you have to consider the foreign exchange losses or gains at transaction period before you make the decision to invest in Kenyan bonds, especially if you're earning and spending in Ugandan shillings. That's something you have to take note of. What is the Kenya-Uganda rate? Because yes, the investments could be really good, but when you convert to Ugandan shillings, then the whole thing is messed up because of probably the highly priced Kenyan shillings against the Ugandan shillings. So as a Ugandan investor investing in Ugandan shillings, that is something you have to critically look at. Now, let's look at the impact on, for example, stocks like Safaricom. In the past 2 years, and I'm looking here at a graph of Safaricom, the price has been coming down from an average of 44, I'm looking back in 2022 now, an average of 44 Kenyan shillings, down to currently 14, from 44 to 14.55 Kenyan shillings. This is a single stock, which is the most valuable stock, probably one that could be representing the Kenyan markets better than any other stock on the market. So I think you get the picture here, why people are running to the bonds. Now the central bank has raised the rates. The bond yields are going to go crazy. And this is where investors really have to keep all their eyes open and keep all their hands on deck. But let's look at the impact on bond yields further. The central bank rate increase will directly impact the treasury bond yields in Kenya, making government bonds and treasury bills more attractive to investors. As of the last week, we've seen the 364 treasury bill mark off to over 15%. When you look at the impact on other institutions, the impact on the lending rates, the central bank rate increase is bound to translate into a pretty much higher lending rate for both the individuals and businesses. This will make borrowing more expensive. And I think this is the goal. This is the goal of the central bank. Making borrowing more expensive, potentially that is going to hinder the investment and consumption activities within the country. Leading banks such as the Equity Bank Limited have already announced that their prime lending rate will be rising over 17.56%. Now, here's the thing. You have the lending institutions or the banks borrowing money from the central bank at the central bank rate, and they have to factor this central bank rate into their lending rates. And in their lending rates, they have to factor in other charges, the so-called surcharges, the banking charges. They also have to feed their employees. Now you're looking at interest rates that are going to go crazy, because if the central bank is putting their rate at 12.5%, it means that the money that these banks are borrowing from the central bank has to be returned at that rate of interest. And how about you, who is going to now borrow from the bank? Because you don't have the capacity to borrow from the central bank. It's only those institutions that can't borrow from the central bank. That's how this results into a higher lending rate. Now, all that could be fine, but then look at the businesses that depend on lending or that depend on borrowing. This is going to definitely be a big blow. And we've seen a public announcement from Equity. I can just read part of it here on my screen. This goes from Equity Bank Limited, and it says, "Dear esteemed members, the Kenyan economy continues to be impacted by many factors, including global and local inflationary pressures, continued depreciation of the Kenyan shillings and other currencies as well. The prevailing El Nino floods as well across the country and the general performance of the macroeconomy have also contributed to an unprecedented rise in the interest rates, translating into increased costs of doing business, increased food prices and increased oil prices. We have, that is Equity Bank, endeavored to cushion members by maintaining the prevailing interest rates despite the challenges highlighted. Following the adjustment of the central bank rate from 10.5% to 12.5% by 200 basis points, Equity Bank wishes to notify their customers and the general public that the bank will, effective 11th December 2023, adjust Equity Bank's reference rate, the EBRR, from the current 14.69% to 17.56%. Consequently, the final interest rate shall be the Equity Bank's reference interest rate, which is 17.56%, plus a margin currently at a maximum of at least 8.5% per annum. This shall apply to all new Kenyan shillings denominated credit facilities. You could underline that as well. So this is exactly what the bank person does. He doesn't take the risk. He doesn't take the burden. He pushes it towards you. And you are part of the private sector. You are part of the investors. And that is why your business is not going to have probably new machines. You're not going to have that expansion you are thinking of, because where are you going to get the money from? This is exactly what's happening in Kenya. Now, further, when you look at with the higher returns on government bonds, banks may also be inclined to lend to the government rather than lend to particular individuals and consumers or businesses, which will significantly limit private sector growth, like I've mentioned. So one of the things that compete for, one of the institutions that compete for the treasury bonds and treasury bills are the banks themselves. Because banks do investments, they do investment in real estate, they do investment in equity, they do investment in now the treasury bonds or the lending markets. And this means that you, an individual competing with other institutions like banks, you're going to definitely be downplayed and you might not be able to compete favorably. If you're to compete, then you must be a very big dog sometimes, and we're not all big dogs. I don't know if you see where we're heading now. This will be a challenging time for business in Kenya, as their cost of living, the cost of capital, particularly for those relying on debt, will increase significantly, particularly in the context of a dollar shortage. Now, where is the opportunity? Where is the light at the end of the tunnel? For Kenyans with disposable funds, this is an opportune moment to invest. With the attractive returns on yields on the one-year treasury bills and the two-year bonds exceeding 15%, it's worth considering allocating a larger portion of your funds to investing in treasury bonds and treasury bills. These bonds are currently offering some of the highest returns in the economy. The levels of returns was last seen in Kenya bonds over 10 years ago in the market. And you can have a graph here that you can look at. That's a summary of what's happening in Kenya. Very big business there, very big story to catch up with. I'll be interacting with a couple of other guests on this topic of the central bank rates, inflation, foreign exchange, the implication or impact on the treasury bonds, and the other lending rates across the region, with other experts as well, to get to the root of this. And we shall be able to do this before Christmas, so that we go to enjoy our Christmas when we know exactly how we're going to be able to take advantage of the situation. There is always a good side, and this is why I want you, my viewers, to be able to critically view. There is always a good side of the coin. There's a good side. There's always a good side. So pick the good side and be amongst the big boys as you get to invest very, very ardently. That's it from us today and tonight. Thank you so much from the team who have been able to make this happen. Thank you so much for viewing. Smart 24 TV is still going. Lots of business coming up your way. And as we are heading towards the Christmas season, we wish you a very happy festive season with your family. And we hope you enjoy yourselves as much as we are enjoying ourselves here. Make sure you remember to save some money this Christmas and invest it somewhere. Invest it in the treasury bonds, invest it in the capital markets. You will not regret it. That's it from us. Have a very wonderful night. Good night. Bye for now. Anthony is my name. See you tomorrow.